Welcome, learners, to another deep dive. Today, we're unpacking a topic that's constantly in the headlines, yet its profound complexities often, well, get lost in the daily noise. The ongoing conflict in Gaza. This isn't just a challenge. It's a deeply entrenched situation defined by fundamental disagreements and incredibly high stakes.
Absolutely. And for this deep dive, we've compiled a really robust stack of sources, everything from in-depth analyses of peace obstacles to detailed chronologies of governance under Hamas and some crucial public opinion surveys, too.
Right.
Our mission today is really to try and cut through that noise, illuminate the core issues preventing a lasting resolution, giving you, the listener, a much clearer picture of the fundamentally conflicting goals and the almost paralyzing distrust that defines this landscape.
So the idea is you'll walk away from this deep dive with a solid grasp of the key players' conflicting visions for Gaza's future, and a clear understanding of precisely why negotiations seem to repeatedly stall and what it truly means for the prospect of peace when you have such, well, diametrically opposed objectives. So what's the first key piece we need to understand? Where do we start?
Let's start right at the foundation. Understanding Hamas itself, its unique form of governance in Gaza, and critically, its stated objectives. These elements are absolutely foundational to grasping the true depth of this conflict.
Okay, let's unpack this then. The material we've reviewed, it reveals that Hamas has been the de facto governing authority in the Gaza Strip since, June 2007? When it took over from the Palestinian Authority?
That's right, yeah. The PA, the internationally recognized body in parts of the West Bank, Hamas pushed them out of Gaza.
And they've essentially established what our sources describe as a one-party authoritarian Islamist statelet. But what does that actually look like on the ground? I mean, how do they maintain such tight control?
Well, what's fascinating here, and frankly quite concerning from a governance perspective, is how they've structured their internal control. They operate three distinct internal security organizations. You've got the General Security Service, which actively stifles dissent through surveillance and a pretty extensive network of informants. Then there's military intelligence, focused primarily, as you'd expect, on Israel.
Right.
And finally, the Internal Security Service. And look, the sheer scale of their General Security Service, our sources indicate that even before the 2023 conflict, it had, 856 personnel and a monthly budget of $120,000, partly for propaganda that tells you this isn't just about maintaining internal order.
No, definitely not.
It's a deeply entrenched, militarized governance structure and is focused on perpetuating their core mission, which directly impacts any pathway to, a civilian-led peace.
That's a critical point. And this isn't just about internal control, though, is it? I mean, the reports we've seen make it abundantly clear that Hamas's very reason for existence, its foundational tenet, is the stated destruction of Israel. This isn't hidden, right? It's fundamental to their ideology.
Exactly. It's right there in their charter and their statements.
So how does that core objective fundamentally shape Israel's posture and, I suppose, the prospects for any kind of good faith negotiation?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, it explains a significant part of Israel's pretty unwavering stance. When Hamas's stated goal is perpetual attack and terrorization of Israel, and look no further than the devastating October 7th attacks, which happened during a ceasefire.
Yeah, that's key. During a ceasefire.
Right. It inherently makes any traditional good faith negotiations incredibly challenging, maybe impossible. Their objective, according to our analyses, isn't just to remain in power, but to continue their fight and not lay down their weapons.
So it raises that fundamental question.
It really does. How do you even begin to negotiate a lasting peace with an entity whose fundamental stated purpose is the destruction of the other party? It puts the whole notion of a comprehensive deal into a very different light, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. So, okay, if that's Hamas's core, what about Israel? What do our sources say is Israel's primary objective in this conflict, especially now after October 7th?
On the other side, Israel's primary objective is just as clear and just as unwavering. It's to dismantle Hamas's military and governing capabilities, full stop, and ensure it no longer poses what they see as an existential threat. They've explicitly and repeatedly rejected any proposals that would allow Hamas, quote, time to rearm.
That phrase comes up again and again, time to rearm.
Exactly. For them, it's not just a negotiation tactic. It's a non-negotiable security imperative.
And this, I imagine, leads us directly to that profound lack of trust we mentioned earlier, the thing that seems to just permeate every aspect of this conflict. What does the data tell us about that?
Yeah, the reports highlight a really striking level of distrust. For instance, a compelling three-quarters of Israelis identify this deep lack of trust as a major obstacle to lasting peace.
Three-quarters.
And the events of October 7th, particularly happening during that ceasefire, they didn't just diminish trust. They fundamentally shattered the credibility in many Israeli eyes of any agreement based solely on Hamas's promises.
And it's mutual, you're saying?
Oh, absolutely. This isn't just one-sided. This mutual distrust means Hamas fears Israel will just resume its offensive once hostages are released, while Israel, conversely, fears Hamas will simply prolong negotiations or, worse, exploit any truce period to rearm and plan more attacks.
It sounds like a classic security dilemma amplified to an extreme degree.
It's a vicious cycle of suspicion, exactly.
So it sounds like for Israel, then, an unconditional surrender by Hamas is perhaps seen as the only truly viable path toward any semblance of peace. And the Israeli public, they seem to largely echo this sentiment.
The numbers are quite stark, yes. Only 21% of Israelis believe that Israel and a Palestinian state can coexist peacefully. Just 21%. That's the lowest percentage recorded since 2013, which, followed a previous major conflict. So it's a significant benchmark.
Yeah, that's a huge drop.
And an overwhelming majority, 72%, believe Hamas is not committed to peace at all.
72%. That figure is incredibly telling, isn't it? It just underscores the immense psychological and emotional barrier on the Israeli side, makes any path forward feel incredibly complex.
Absolutely. And that core ideological clash, coupled with the profound distrust you just described, it directly feeds into the practical disagreements, the sticking points that continually stall negotiations. Let's maybe look at some of the most critical examples highlighted in our sources.
Let's do it. Okay, first, there seem to be clashing visions for post-war governance in Gaza. Big surprise there. Israel insists Hamas can never again rule Gaza, okay? But they've also ruled out any significant role for the Palestinian Authority in a post-conflict scenario, right?
That's correct. Their stated preference, at least in some official communications, is to maintain overall security control themselves while delegating civilian governance to what they term politically independent Palestinians.
Politically independent Palestinians. But the reports note a significant hurdle there, don't they?
Yes, a massive one. I mean, the sources point out that first, no such independent individuals have actually volunteered to take on this extremely perilous role. And perhaps more tellingly, Hamas has explicitly threatened anyone who cooperates with such an Israeli-backed arrangement.
So it creates a vacuum.
It really does. It raises an incredibly important question. If you dismantle one governing structure, what realistic, viable, and crucially willing alternative can truly step in? Especially when a major power, Israel, opposes the most widely accepted alternative, the Palestinian Authority, and its path to statehood. It creates a genuine vacuum of credible options.
Okay, so that's governance. Then there are the specifics of the hostage and prisoner exchanges, always a huge point of contention. Hamas demands the release of a large number of Palestinian prisoners, including very senior militants involved in past attacks. Israel is understandably deeply reluctant to grant this.
Understandably, yes. And our sources offer a really potent reminder of why this is such a sticking point for Israel. One of the alleged masterminds of the devastating 2023 October 7th attack was, in fact, a former prisoner released in a previous exchange deal.
Right, the Gilad Shalit deal is often cited there.
Exactly. So for Hamas, the remaining hostages are unequivocally their most valuable bargaining chip. The analysis suggests they are highly unlikely to release them without concrete assurances that the war will actually end.
But Israel sees their release differently.
Completely differently. Israel views their release as a non-negotiable prerequisite, a moral and national imperative. And this ties directly back to Israel's profound fear of Hamas rearming. Any mass release of convicted militants is seen as directly enabling future attacks. It feels like a zero-sum game in their eyes.
Okay, and finally, the blockade. The long-standing blockade on Gaza. That's another major point of friction, right? Hamas demands it be lifted entirely for reconstruction efforts, but Israel deems this a non-starter.
A complete non-starter, yes. Again, fearing it would just allow Hamas to rebuild its military capabilities, import weapons or materials, and ultimately claim a significant victory.
So what are the broader implications of this specific stalemate? It's not just about military capacity.
No, not at all. Our sources emphasize that this stalemate over the blockade not only perpetuates Israel's security concerns, but it also has immense humanitarian consequences for the civilian population in Gaza. It severely limits the flow of essential goods, building materials, everything needed for basic living, and now extensive reconstruction. It highlights that painful complexity of balancing security needs with basic human needs, and it's a huge factor in the ongoing suffering there.
So, given these really deep-seated disagreements, these fundamental blocks, what do recent developments tell us about the practical realities on the ground, particularly regarding Hamas's resilience?
Well, despite significant Israeli military advances and operations over months, our sources consistently indicate that parts of the Gaza Strip have, maybe remarkably, remained under Hamas control. The organization has shown clear signs of regrouping, reestablishing its presence in areas the IDF had previously cleared.
So they melt away and then reemerge.
It seems so. For example, back in January 2025, a U.S. brokered ceasefire went into effect. But even with an IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces' withdrawal from certain areas, Hamas effectively retained control over key parts of the Gaza Strip.
So this means Hamas is effectively, perhaps not governing fully, but certainly back in control of parts of Gaza, despite extensive Israeli efforts to dismantle them. And even with leadership changes, we saw Yahya Sinwar reported killed in October 2024, Mohammed Sinwar assassinated in May 2025, and now is al-Din al-Haddad apparently leading the underlying structure, the operational capacity of Hamas. It seems to remain intact.
Exactly. It really speaks to the deeply entrenched nature of the organization within Gaza's society and infrastructure. It's not just about the top leadership. Look, as recently as July 1st, 2025, we saw Qatar present a modified hostage deal proposal.
Yeah.
But what happened? Israel immediately rejected a proposed 5-year Gaza ceasefire deal, precisely because it would, in their view, allow Hamas time to rearm.
There's that phrase again.
There it is again. It forcefully reinforces Israel's consistent red line regarding Hamas's military capabilities. And honestly, many analysts looking across the spectrum believe that as long as the fundamental red lines of both parties remain mutually exclusive, Hamas's continued existence as a military and governing force versus Israel's absolute security requirement, a truly comprehensive and lasting deal will remain unattainable.
It really highlights that ideological chasm, doesn't it? It seems almost impossible to bridge without one side fundamentally shifting its core identity or objective.
That seems to be the crux of it, yes.
So after exploring all these layers, it becomes incredibly clear why reaching a lasting peace in Gaza feels like such a monumental, maybe even impossible uphill battle. We've seen how Hamas's foundational ideology, Israel's paramount security concerns, and this profound, pervasive lack of trust create appears to be, a near insurmountable wall.
It truly does highlight the immense difficulty. When one side's stated reason for being is the destruction of the other, and the other side sees any concession, any allowance for the first side to exist militarily as a direct, existential threat to its own existence and the safety of its citizens, well, the space for compromise shrinks dramatically.
Yeah.
And that deep skepticism among the Israeli public about lasting peace, that 72% figure, it's a direct reflection of this harrowing reality they feel they're living.
It certainly is. And this leaves us with a truly challenging thought, maybe something for you, our listeners, to ponder. If Hamas continues to demonstrate this ability to rebuild its military capabilities, to assert control even during or after ceasefires, and Israel remains absolutely committed to preventing that at all costs, what pathway, if any, could possibly lead to a resolution that genuinely addresses the core security fears and ideological goals of both sides, given that their fundamental red lines appear completely irreconcilable?
And perhaps just as importantly, what does that persistent conflict mean for the civilian population of Gaza, who continue to live under Hamas's rule, endure the immense humanitarian consequences of the conflict and the blockade? And what does it mean for the Israeli population, who remain acutely vulnerable to attacks as long as Hamas retains capability and intent?
Profound questions, for sure, ones without easy answers. Thank you for joining us on The Deep Dive. Until next time, keep digging for truth.